We're here today in Port Huron, right under the Edison Depot. We're awaiting the unveiling of the young Thomas Edison statue. It's an exciting day. The weather's not so cooperative today, but we're still expecting a crowd anyhow. Port Huron High School Band, as well as the marching band from Northern High School here in Port Huron, will be attending the event. It should be a gala event here. Back in 1975, the Gannett Foundation commissioned the museum to erect a statue here in Edison Park. The museum then commissioned Mino Duffy, a local artist here in Port Huron, to sculpture the statue. She's been working on it since 1975, and here we are in 1989 anticipating its unveiling. There's some other activities here as well. The Edison Depot will be open for the first time to the public. There's displays in the depot from the museum on Edison. There's even an Edison press that young Tom Edison used on the train when he was a boy, a replica of the press. And it's even workable. There will be the schedule. We're printing out the day's events on the back of the program. So that ought to be fun. There's balloons. We have the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts here blowing up balloons that will be given away, as well as free cider and donuts.
Festivities and unveiling of our new statue to young Thomas Alva Edison. Young Tom Edison, he was known as Alva Edison then, lived in Port Huron from ages 7 to 17 in a residence that was less than 600 yards, right almost straight off to my left. Young Tom Edison, at this time in his life, was a time that his curiosity peaked, and it was the very beginnings of his entrepreneurship. It was while he lived here that he first recognized that when he saw a need, he himself had the ability and the talent and the creativity to fulfill that need. In later life, that would lead him to invent over 1,000 different items that have made life easier for all of us here today. Indeed, young Tom Edison ventured from Port Huron to light the world. On behalf of the City of Port Huron, I would like to introduce Mr. Pat Cogley, Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Port Huron.
Thanks, Wayne. Thank you. On behalf of the City of Port Huron, the residents of the City of Port Huron, I want to take this time to thank the Gannett Foundation, the Times-Herald, Museum, and the Duffy family for their generous contribution to the City of Port Huron. I know that all of the children will be especially pleased with this, as I'm sure all of the citizens of Port Huron will come to be very proud of this statue. Again, I wish to say thank you for them and for all the citizens of Port Huron. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. This statue of young Tom was commissioned by the Museum of Arts and Industry, and we have with us today their president, Mrs. Dorothy Henry.
Thank you. The Museum of Arts and History welcomes you to share in this happy and historical occasion. The museum was honored to accept a major responsibility for this project, including the commissioning of the work, and we congratulate Mino Duffy Kramer, who has created a sensitive, inspirational interpretation of the great inventor as a boy. We thank the Gannett Foundation for its generous funding of the project, and especially the Times-Herald and Dwayne McAllister, publisher. The mission statement of the Museum of Arts and History reads as follows: to encourage an appreciation of the arts and history in our community through education and preserving our heritage. It would be difficult to imagine a more appropriate enterprise than the one we're celebrating here today, combining both art and history. A magnificent statue of our community's most historically significant citizen placed in this beautiful and dramatic setting. Our community has had a proud historical past, and no part is brighter than our ties to Thomas Edison. On behalf of all who worked so long and diligently to make this day possible, we present the statue of Thomas A. Edison as a boy to the community.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thomas Edison obviously has not lived in our community for well over 100 years now, but we've had numerous other people with exceptional talents. Fortunately, one of those people with the most exceptional talents was willing, indeed anxious, to accept the unique challenge of capturing Tom Edison's personality as well as his likeness. Mino Duffy Kramer was born and raised in Port Huron and left for a few years to develop her talent and hone her skills. And this is her first major work upon returning to Port Huron. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you a person whose talent will be immediately apparent to you upon viewing the new statue. Mino.
Thank you. This is quite a day for me. I've spent, as a lot of you know, I've spent a lot of time on this piece. This is a real dream come true for a sculptor, a project like this. I moved back to my hometown, and all of a sudden I've got the commission of a lifetime. Doing a figure of someone of this stature was a real challenge for me. Even more of a challenge, bringing him back to boyhood. I spent many hours with that guy over there. He didn't talk much, but I learned a lot from him. In doing the research about what he was all about here, I learned a whole lot about what Port Huron must have been like in the 1800s. And for me, that was a wonderful addition to this project. It was very exciting. It's made living here a much richer experience for me. I want to thank Mr. Dwayne McAllister and the Gannett Foundation, Mr. Steve Williams and the Museum of Arts and History, and Mr. Dan Martin for giving me a chance to do this project. But mostly, I'd like to thank Mr. Thomas Edison for reintroducing me to my hometown. Thank you.
Today's celebration and unveiling pays tribute to Port Huron's most famous former resident. Our featured speaker this afternoon is perhaps Port Huron's second most famous former resident. Just as Thomas Edison left Port Huron to light the world, our speaker today left Port Huron to make a name for himself and serve his citizens of the state of Michigan in several capacities, up to and including serving in as governor back when there were 2-year terms from 1960 to 1962. I introduce to you a person who many of you know, a former resident and former governor of the state of Michigan, the Honorable John Swinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. McAllister, and Mayor Pro Tem Pat Cogley, President of the History Museum, Dorothy Henry, our sculptor, Mino Duffy, and to my right, the great-grandson of Thomas Alva Edison, Barry Sloan. Let me say I am delighted to be asked back. I think perhaps Mr. McAllister overstated it, that I left under quite the circumstances that he has described, but I will not go into great detail. Let me say that I also want to recognize that there are some members of my family present here today who are still residents and citizens of this area. You introduce the youngest first. I see that we have Josh and Fred Hind, and we have Jamie and David Brown with their mothers, my nieces, Kathy and Sandy, and my brother and Marge are still here, and really it was like a homecoming for me to be invited by Marcia Haynes. I mentioned that she should have had it last weekend when the weather was a little more clement, but she informed me that they had considered that, but decided not to do it because it was exactly 110 years ago today, on October 21st, when Thomas Alva Edison had the first light up. And so it was to be today or no day, and I'm proud that I'm here, even though I also promised some of the people that this might be the shortest speech on record because of the weather that we have today. You know, I have already said that it's the most significant date, the exact 110th anniversary of the electric light, invented by Thomas Alva Edison at the age of 32. And we have gathered here today to commemorate the life and times of one of America's great inventors, Thomas Alva Edison, who as a boy was a resident, as you know, of Port Huron from 1854 to 1863. 9 years that he lived here, and perhaps the 9 most important formative years in the life of any boy. Well, you know, a considerable store of our knowledge of the past derives from monuments such as we are going to dedicate today, from memorials, from markers erected to honor the memory of notable persons, to identify the site of an important event, to perpetuate the memory of great deeds, or to commemorate a great achievement. These usually bear or contain inscriptions of a descriptive nature, which are indicative of the desire of those who erected them to leave to future generations a record which they regarded as worthy of preservation. A simple gravestone, bearing only the name of the person who lies buried beneath it, together with the dates of birth and death, is just as truly a memorial as the vast structures in Washington built to honor Washington, Lincoln, Jefferson. And often historians and genealogists find the missing link in their research on a modest slab of stone in an old country cemetery. From the pyramids of ancient Egypt to the memorials recently designed to honor the memory of late President John F. Kennedy, we seek to commemorate persons or events. And you know, it's becoming more and more important in our lives, particularly in the last 2 or 3 decades. We are rediscovering our roots, our heritage, and we must preserve them. From the age of 7 through 16, young Al, as he was known to his family, accomplished much. As you all know, the railroad arrived in Port Huron in 1859. Thomas Alva Edison was a 12-year-old boy and applied and received the position of a news butcher on the train that ran between Port Huron and Detroit. But that wasn't his only accomplishment. He was a very enterprising young man. He also opened 2 stores, one to sell newspapers and one to sell fresh vegetables. He hired other persons to operate these stores while he continued on the railroad. As we all know, the Civil War began in the 1860, and the people were hungry for news of the battles, and he began his own newspaper called the Weekly Herald. That was in 1861. In 1862, by some very fortuitous circumstances, he was able to learn railroad telegraphy. The fortuitous circumstances, as you know, was that he became a hero, at least to one person named J.U. Mackenzie, the station agent whose son he was able to save from almost certain death. In 1863, he left Port Huron and embarked upon his remarkable career that included the invention of the phonograph at age 30, the electric light at age 32, and the motion picture at age 44. I wonder what he would say when he got back today, if he could come back and found what our VCRs and how every 3-year-old child can operate those VCRs at this time. At his death in 1931, he left a legacy of light and sound to the world. A man that should be honored, his place in history secure, and it remains for us to preserve the artifacts in the area where he spent so much time. We should be very proud that at one time, living right here in this area, was one of the greatest inventors the world has ever known, Thomas Alva Edison. Thank you very much. I'm very proud to be able to dedicate this statue today.
Thank you very much, Governor. To do the unveiling of the statue this afternoon, we are proud to have with us Mr. C. Barry Edison Sloan, great-grandson of Thomas Alva Edison. Assisting him will be our young scouts, and upon the conclusion of the unveiling, our ceremony today will be over. Our ceremony will be over, but not our celebration. We invite you to join us at the depot over here, where we will be putting on a couple of presentations. Mr. Drew Burgess, a junior at Port Huron High School, has taken on the role of young Tom Edison and will be giving be telling short stories about himself. Also, we'll be serving cider and donuts inside, and there will be a demonstration of a printing press similar to the one Thomas Edison used when he was riding the train between here and Detroit. I say a printing press similar to the one used because the very one he used, believe it or not, is believed to still be buried in the basement of his home site a few hundred yards to our south. Barry Sloan, his grandmother, was Madeline Edison, who was the daughter of Thomas Edison and his second wife, Mina. Barry lives in Woodbury, where he is in the real estate business, has served some time in city council, and I'm sure that was an interesting time for you as well. So we welcome Barry Sloan to do the honors of the unveiling for his likeness of his great-grandfather. Okay?
Thank you. It's a real pleasure and an honor for me to be here today with you folks and to participate in the celebration of the 110 years of electric light. Thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about Thomas Edison's qualities as a man and a little bit from the family perspective. One of the most extraordinary characteristics of Thomas Edison was his insatiable curiosity and his education. Here was a man who had less than 6 weeks of formal schooling, and in fact, he was considered, quote, addled by the people in the school. So his mother took him out of school and taught him herself, and under her guidance, he developed a love of learning and curiosity and a voracious appetite for reading. My grandmother said of him, all his life, Father was a tremendous reader. He read very fast and could remember everything he read. His reading covered every sort of subject, and we never needed an encyclopedia in our house because Father knew all the answers. It amused me to read in the newspapers at various times when some opinion of Father's had impinged on someone's toes that Edison was not qualified to speak on such and such a thing, but he should keep to his own subject. It would have been difficult to say what that subject was. History, chemistry, medicine, music, current events, everything was grist to his mill. Sunday morning found our living room deep in newspapers. I think he read a half dozen or so, innumerable magazines, and the ever-present scientific reference books. Edison had great patience, perseverance, faith, and a huge capacity for work. His description of his approach to discovery demonstrates this quality. He said, when I want to discover something, I begin by reading up on everything that has been done along that line in the past. That's all the books in the library are for. I see what has been accomplished at great expense in the past. I gather the data of many thousands of experiments as a starting point, and then I do thousands more. It usually takes 5 to 7 years to perfect a thing. Some things I've been working on for 25 years. Some are still unsolved. My average would be about 7 years. Edison was a dreamer. A lot of his success was in looking at things in different perspectives and following that dream no matter how absurd it may seem. Take the phonograph, for example. Imagine coming into work on Monday morning and your boss hands you a scrawled piece of paper with unrelated parts on it and tells you, make this, and you have no idea what you're making. Well, that's precisely what happened to Edison's associates one morning. Imagine their puzzlement when he started speaking to a machine. Mary had a little lamb, he said. Imagine their outright astonishment and disbelief when that machine talked back. Well, I've talked a little bit about the man who had a profound effect on each of us. The qualities I've talked about are as important today as they were then. His love of learning, his curiosity, his ability to dream, and his perseverance. But the most important quality of all was his love and his passion for what he did. Thomas Edison and Mino Duffy Kramer share something in common. Both are creators. Mino understands the dreaming, the patience, the hard work, and the near mystical connection with the work, and also the love that are necessary in order to create something of beauty and of worth. So did Edison. To Edison, his work was so intensely interesting, it was play. Here was a man who found his bliss and he followed it. Imagine what a grand world this would be if each of us found our bliss and followed it with the same unswerving faith as Edison did. To me, this statue here today and this ceremonies here are more than commemorating Edison's great contributions. They are to remind each and every one of us that we too have the capacity to dream, to create, and to contribute to our world in very significant ways. We today are reminded as a community and as individuals that the great possibilities are here now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Won't you step closer for a closer look? Thank you.